Have you heard about the movement to try to change our Constitution? Various conservative groups have been pushing for new amendments to the Constitution using a process known as the Article 5 Convention. Some of these groups include Convention of States, American Legislative Exchange Council, the Goldwater Institute, the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force, and even Mark Levin, well-known radio host, wrote a book called The Liberty Amendments. All of them are pushing for an Article 5 Convention, as described in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, in order to make changes to the Constitution. They assure us that this is a process that will be totally controlled by the states. For support of this claim, each of these groups point to the research of one man, Professor Robert Natelson. If we were to point to just one person as the foundation for the entire conservative effort to amend the Constitution, that would have to be Professor Natelson. Those who oppose a convention often point to the Constitution itself to refute the claim that the states would totally control this convention process. In the Necessary and Proper Clause found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, it gives Congress the power to make all laws that shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution any powers that are given to the federal government. Because in Article 5, Congress is given the power to call the convention once enough states have applied for it, Congress has viewed that as justification for them to make laws regarding the call of a convention. Not just some laws, but all laws regarding the call of a convention. In a radio interview recently, Professor Natelson has sought to refute that claim. He claimed,
"The Necessary and Proper Clause does not apply to Article 5. Again, we have court decisions over 200 years on Article 5. You can't ignore these court decisions, including U.S. Supreme Court. And what they say is that when a body acts under Article 5, whether Congress or a state legislature or a convention for proposing amendments, when they act under Article 5 to amend the Constitution, they are not part of the federal government. They are not branches of the federal government. And the Necessary and Proper Clause only applies to branches of the federal government." Again, a lot of case law on this general subject.
So Congress is not part of the federal government when acting on Article 5. When pressed for sources for this surprising claim, Robert Natelson cited,
one case, for example, was a case decided in 1922 called Leeser versus Garnett. It is held repeatedly, and the lower courts have backed this up. This is uncontradicted constitutional law.
So what does Leeser versus Garnett actually say? Speaking of the powers under Article 5 for state legislatures and Congress, it says, "The function of a state legislature in ratifying a proposed amendment to the federal Constitution, like the function of Congress in proposing the amendment, is a federal function." Leeser versus Garnett not only doesn't support what Professor Natelson said, it says the exact opposite. The powers given to Congress and state legislatures under Article 5 are federal functions. But, like Professor Natelson said,
you can't ignore these court decisions,